Hello and welcome to Supposedly Fun. My name is Greg and I am here today to do a Friday Reads video where I wrap up the week in reading and talk about bookish things that have gone on in the world. I tried to get Teddy for this video and he was really not feeling it. I think we have officially hit spring weather. At least it feels like it this week. It's warm. I see blue skies mixed in with the cloud. It's really great. And Teddy has spent most of the day sitting at the front door looking out and watching squirrels, watching people walk by with dogs, just loving the nice weather. So when I tried to get him back here to sit him down and do a Friday Reads, he was like, no, I don't want to do this. So, oh well, I tried. I'm sorry. Hopefully we'll get him back during the summer, but maybe this is just the way it's going to be for a little while. He definitely has not had as much patience to sit for a video since the weather started getting nice, and I get it. I get it. It's been a big week because we got two shortlists, one for the International Booker Prize. I'll put my reaction down below. And one for the Carol Shields Prize for fiction. I've really enjoyed talking about both with people, although I feel like I'm perpetually behind on comments at this point, so I should stop apologizing and just maybe embrace that this is what it is. I can't keep up with the comments anymore. It's unfortunate. I try, but yeah, I've really enjoyed having conversations with people about the short lists and the long lists. I think, you know, there has been a lot of feedback about the International Booker. It does still feel like the International Booker has been a lot more quiet this year. And from the feedback, there are a lot of people who haven't been so into the International Booker long list and short list for this year, which probably gives them more room to think about the Women's Prize for fiction and for nonfiction and the Carol Shields Prize and things like that. I've been really glad that people are so into the Carol Shields Prize. I had somehow completely forgotten that Brotherless Night, which was shortlisted for the Carol Shields Prize, was longlisted for the Women's Prize for fiction. And it would be really interesting to see, because the feedback I've gotten on Brotherless Night on the Carol Shields reaction is really good. So part of me is wondering if this could be another year where the winner of the Women's Prize has already won a major prize, because the Carol Shields Prize will be announced first. So it will be interesting to see if Brotherless Night ends up winning both. We'll see. And if you have not seen the reaction video to either one of those, I'll have it in the description box down below. We get a bit of a break from book awards, which I'm sure will relieve a lot of people because it's a lot. It really is a lot. There's just a lot going on. Things will pick up again at the end of the month. On April 24th, we will get the shortlist for the Women's Prize for fiction, and then the Pulitzer will be May 6th. And somebody had asked if I'm still going to be around when the Pulitzer Prize is announced, because I'm going to be gone in Ireland for a big chunk of May. I will be. I will be around. It's not that I planned my trip around the Pulitzer Prize announcement. It's just a happy little circumstance that worked out in my favor. I'll be home when it is announced. So hopefully I will be able to get a reaction video to that out. And hopefully I'll be able to film live again. I was able to do it last year and, you know, it worked out. Because last year was shocking. And if you saw the video, you know. That's really the big thing that has gone on in the bookish world this week, and now we get a bit of a lull again, so that's it. Let's talk about the Friday Reads. I did finish one book, and I almost finished a second one. I really could have finished the second one, but I've held off because it's going to be emotionally devastating, and I need to prepare my body for that, basically, and my soul for that. So we'll talk about that one next. I do want to give a PSA before I get into the Friday Reads portion of the video, because I don't really think I'm going to talk about anything that is a spoiler discussion of Here We Go Again. But if you really don't want to know anything about the book, maybe you should skip that part, and I'll have the jacket superimposed over here so you can scroll along the bottom and find the point where it goes away and just avoid Here We Go Again. But everything I talk about is in the plot description of the book. So that's why I don't think it's a spoiler, but if you don't want to know about the book, maybe just skip that portion of the video. That's your PSA before we get started. let's get into the Friday Reads portion of the video. So the book that I finished was All the Right Notes by Dominic Lim. Now, this is a very different scenario from last week when I did a Friday Reads video, and I had just started All the Right Notes, and I had just started Here We Go Again by Alison Cochrane. You can guess that's the one that's going to be emotionally devastating, I think. And that's not a spoiler. We'll get into it when we talk about that one. But the nice thing about not having forced myself to work through a lot of those books is that I actually inadvertently put myself in a nice position to finish both of them this week because I had a head start on reading them. And I still took my time. I didn't rush. I didn't force myself, but I finished 2 books. And it's entirely because I had a head start from last week, and that was good. Anyway, All the Right Notes. I had talked a lot about how both books, All the Right Notes and Here We Go Again, in their early stages, were doing things that usually are sort of pet peeves of mine, but I was willing to go along with them and see where they go because they were charming enough. And I'll just spoil this for the next part of the discussion. Here We Go Again, ultimately, I think was more successful. I've gotten much more into that book, and ultimately, I kind of just thought All the Right Notes was okay. It's a really sweet book. It did everything I needed it to do, which is great, but I didn't quite gel with the back and forth structure at any point through the book, and it does kind of disappear toward the end because it starts at the present day. And then the next chapter flashes back to high school, and then you're back in the present day, then back to high school, back to the present day, back to high school, and then that just kind of goes away toward the end, and I won't say why. But I never really got into that back and forth, and it definitely kept doing things like what I talked about last week, where there is something that forced the protagonist and his male love interest apart, and you don't know what it is, and it keeps teasing details, and it keeps teasing the details out so that you need this back and forth structure, but I don't know. It ultimately, to me, was just a good book. Not a great book, but a good book. It did everything I needed it to do. It was charming, but I definitely think there were some structural things that I didn't have a whole lot of patience for, to be honest. So the premise of this book is that you have this guy, Quito. In the present day, he is living in New York and performing in a Broadway bar, a piano bar, on weekends and sort of part-time filling in on Broadway shows and things like that. He has loved music his entire life. Interestingly, and I mentioned this in the last Friday Reads, in the beginning, he talks about how when his mother would sing when he was a child, he saw the music as colors, and that sort of reminded me of what the cover of the book looks like. It never mentions that again in the rest of the book. So I think that's just sort of an example of how this book will start to go in some interesting areas and then not really explore that. And there is also at least one subplot that seems to just kind of vanish without getting really resolved. So maybe there's a little bit of room for Dominic Lim to grow as a writer in this area, but he definitely has the stuff. There are just those little nitpicky details that didn't quite gel for me. But anyway, so Quito's father calls him and announces that he is retiring. He's going to have a big concert at the end of the year, and he wants Quito to come back. But the trick is he wants Quito to get Quito's old high school friend Emmett back for the concert. Emmett is now a famous actor, very popular, and has not spoken to Quito ever since. They graduated from high school, well, college. They haven't spoken since they were both in college. And that's sort of the thing that is teased out throughout the book, sort of mercilessly long, in my opinion, what caused them to not speak for all this time. And of course, they are thrown together. Emmett agrees to help work on this concert. And you can probably predict a lot of where the story will go from there. But again, it is charming. It is funny. There are some really interesting characters. Quito has a best friend who is a non-binary drag performer, and that is fun and a great character. I kind of wish they had a little more to do in the story, but again, solid foundation, not quite great, but definitely good and enjoyable. I feel like I'm really damning this book with faint praise, but it was enjoyable. It was everything that I needed it to be, some definite cinnamon bun action, and that's really all I can ask. And I would definitely be interested in what Dominic Lim does next, because I think he has an ear for this type of story. I believe this is his first book, but you can sort of see how there's room for growth. Yeah, I don't see anything about other books that he has written, so I'm going to just go on the idea that this is a debut. Yeah, it doesn't say anything about other books, even in his bio, so we're going to go with it. So there's definitely promise in his writing, and I would go back. This is sort of like Ryan Love and Arthur and Teddy are coming out. I feel like I complained a lot about that book when I read it, but I really liked it. And I would read Ryan Love's next book as well. And that's sort of where I'm at with All the Right Notes by Dominic Lim. All right, let's talk about Here We Go Again by Alison Cochrane. So it's interesting when you accidentally read books that have thematic pairings and you didn't plan it that way. It just sort of happens. Both All the Right Notes and Here We Go Again deal with the notion of saying goodbye to a parental figure in very different ways. In this case, it's sort of a retirement, and, you know, his father has had health problems recently, but, you know, it's not like the type of goodbye necessarily that you're getting in Here We Go Again, but there are elements of it in here. And because I was reading both books at the same time, Here We Go Again on audio, it's just interesting when your reads start to vibe like that. And that happened with these. So in Here We Go Again, you have two women, Rosemary and Logan, and they went to high school together. Again, they're vibing, and they were best friends. And then they didn't talk to each other for about 20 years after they graduated. And all of a sudden they are in the same place again. They're vibing. So in this case, it's because Rosemary went to Yale and then went to Columbia, got a degree in teaching, and somehow ended up back in her hometown teaching at her old high school, where it turns out Logan has also become a teacher. And both of them were sort of set down the path toward becoming teachers by a mentor figure in their lives, who is not a father biologically to either one of them, but is sort of a father figure that they needed. One of them has a dead father, and the other one has a father, but her father has never been a sort of mentor to her, being realistic. So he definitely filled that role. He made them feel wanted and loved and safe, and they both decided to do that for other people, but for very different reasons. Logan is like chaos in human form, basically, and she is neurodivergent, ADHD, and sort of incapable of really planning and incapable of sticking with a plan. She is constantly moving around like a pinball in a machine. Just, you know, that sort of kinetic energy is just the way she moves through the world. And then Rosemary is very safe and very practical, methodical, really struggles not to have a plan at all. And, you know, when they pack for the trip, for example, she has an entire suitcase dedicated to office supplies, like a wireless printer and things like that. And she's created a whole binder with places they can stop and what to do in case of an emergency. That is Rosemary in a nutshell. And again, that's not a spoiler because they leave for the trip really early on in the book. And they go on a road trip together because this mentor figure, Joe Delgado, is dying, and he asks both of them to take him on a road trip. He has a house out in Bar Harbor, Maine, and he decided that he wants to die there. So last week I had said I don't quite know if he's going to go on the road trip or if he's going to die and they're going to have to go on a road trip in his honor. Well, he goes on the road trip, but the road trip, it's jokingly referred to by Logan and Joe as a death trip because they know that they're getting him to Bar Harbor, Maine so he can die. And of course, there are a lot of divergences along the way. They make a lot of unplanned stops, some planned detours, things happen. And I think for me, the book took a bit of a while to get off the ground. And when I say a while, maybe 30 to 40% of the audio, it was starting to feel a little repetitive in the beginning because, and even later in the book, they do have very similar conversations again and again and again. For instance, especially in the first half of the book, Joe will want to take a detour. Rosemary will say no, and he'll say, but I'm dying. This is my death trip. You have to do it. And it's like, oh my God, we've had this conversation a lot. And that sort of repeats. So it took me a while to really get into the rhythm of the book. But once I did, I was pretty sold, pretty hooked. I love these characters. What Alison Cochrane does that I really like is that she writes great characters who have very great connections with each other. And I'm not just talking about Rosemary and Logan. I'm talking about Rosemary, Logan, and Joe. They just connect. They feel alive. It feels like a real relationship, and you can see why they are so important to each other and why they would be going on this trip together. And that is sort of what I look for when I'm looking for a romance or something in this sort of cinnamon bun area. I really don't enjoy a romance unless it feels like there's a genuine connection and solid foundation of a relationship between the two characters. And Alison Cochrane is really good at that. And she's so good at that that it can make a premise that you don't like or wouldn't ordinarily enjoy feel like something that you want to read or that you're into. Like The Charm Offensive, I mentioned this last week, doesn't feel like something that I would be into because it's a romance set in a TV show sort of like The Bachelor. And I don't watch The Bachelor. I have only ever watched one episode of The Bachelor, and it was because they were going to the lake where Joel and I got married, so we were curious, and it was not worth it, I would say. So Alison Cochrane made me completely buy into the premise of a love story between two men on the show The Bachelor, or a show like The Bachelor. It's not The Bachelor for copyright reasons, obviously, but she got me to buy into that. And then you had this holiday romance, Kiss Her Once for Me, that has a very cliched premise where one woman agrees to be a sort of fake fiance for a man for the holidays, and then she runs into the woman who got away, and it feels like a sort of cloying, predictable premise, and Alison Cochrane really makes it work. And the same thing happens here, where you force these two women to get on a road trip together, and ultimately it really works. Again, I feel like in this case, it had to rev the engine a little bit before it really got going. Listen to me making road trip metaphors, but but it really got going, and I have enjoyed it a lot since then. Now, as I said, I could have finished this book easily if I had wanted to today, but I'm coming up to the end of the book, and you know, when you pick up the book because of the premise, you know it's a death trip. You know that things are going to be sad. It's not going to be a happy road trip in the end. So I'm kind of at the point where I have an hour left, and I knew that I couldn't emotionally handle the last hour of this book today because I'm filming this on a Friday. What am I supposed to do? Be emotionally devastated and then finish my workday? What? I don't think I could do that. I'd be sobbing. At least Joel is home, because I feel like when I finish this book, I'm going to need a big hug. But because it's beautiful, and I love it, and I love the characters. And I don't really feel like this is a spoiler discussion because the book tells you right off the bat, Joe Delgado is dying. They are going on a death trip. But, you know, I'm just putting it out there. It's a beautiful book. I would say it's definitely a journey worth your time, but I have an hour left. So maybe there's a chance that it could fall apart in the last hour. Who knows? But I'm really sold on this book and enjoying it very much. And I feel like I'm ready to have my heart broken. Totally ready to have my heart broken. But we'll see how that goes. Maybe I'll finish it tonight. Maybe I'll finish it tomorrow morning and then just have a good cry, and then we'll go do our Saturday thing. And I will be okay emotionally because Teddy will give me hugs, Joel will give me hugs, and it will all be fine in the end. But I'm really enjoying this book. And I'd say if you are someone who enjoys romances or queer romances, I would always recommend an Alison Cochrane to you because this is now the third book that I have really gone in hard on and enjoyed. So she seems like the real deal to me. I already had a feeling after the first two that she was an insta-read author for me, and that is absolutely turning out to be true. I don't actually own copies of any of her books, and that's a shame. I might have to fix that because I really do love all three of them, and they're all very interesting. And in The Charm Offensive, you have a character who's really overcoming anxiety, and part of the big connection between the characters is that the other protagonist really helps calm him down. And it's not a crutch, it's a connection. And I love that. I just really have enjoyed all three of her books. And again, I'm not done with this one, so we'll have to wait and see. But I can't imagine it's going to stumble in the last hour of listening. I just need to be in a place where I'm ready to cry when I get to that last hour. Hi, Editing Greg is jumping in because I just wanted to hammer in one quick point about Here We Go Again. And I think if you've listened to the discussion I've had about it, you can probably guess. But definite trigger warnings. If you are someone who is struggling with grief over someone in your family or a friend or a loved one that you have lost, maybe this book will help you through it, but maybe it would be a bit of a trigger for it. But particularly, just PSA, if you have helped a loved one through the process of saying goodbye, if you've been a caretaker for a loved one, there could definitely be some triggers in Here We Go Again. So I just want to throw that out there so you can be mindful if those are things that would be difficult for you as a reader. And if you think they could provide you with some release or catharsis or something like that, then sure, dive in. But just be aware that those are definite themes in the book. So let's go back to the rest of the Friday Reads. So what did I do once I finished all the right notes? I actually have 2 books from the library, and I was thinking about picking up Blackouts by Justin Torres because I want to read that before the Pulitzer announcement, just in case it ends up winning. But one of my library books is also something that I talk about in my Pulitzer Prize predictions video, which I will have linked down below. Biography of X by Catherine Lacey. And I decided to start it. Now, here's the thing, because I'm still embracing this sort of slow reading, no pressure movement, I am on page 28 of this book. But I feel confident saying I have fallen under the spell pretty quickly. Within 28 pages, I have frequently thought to myself, I really want to read a chapter of that right now. If only I didn't have to work and things like that, because I would like to be making progress on this book. So who knows, maybe I'll end up reading this one more quickly than I have been reading anything else lately, because I feel like I'm really excited about it. So Biography of X is a fictional biography. You have a woman who is writing this biography of her wife who has died, and her wife is a famous artist. Here's something that I really actually even enjoyed just in the beginning of the book. So as you open the book and start turning to the first page, you get to the title page. Nothing really new there. Turn the page, you have a copyright page and an author's note. Nothing new there. Turn the page and you have a black page, or 2 black pages. Slightly less black pages. Slightly less black pages. Gray pages. And then you have another title page, but this time, instead of Catherine Lacey, it has the name of the character who allegedly has written this book, and a fake copyright page with the table of contents. I just thought that was kind of fun, and I think that shows some of the creative verve of this book. And then right from the first page, I got sucked into this. I mean, let me read just a little bit of the beginning of this book for you. The first winter she was dead, it seemed every day for months on end was damp and bright. It had always just rained, but I could never remember the rain, and I took the train down to the city for a few days a week, searching, it seemed, for a building I might enter and fall from, a task about which I could never quite determine my own sincerity, as it seemed to me the seriousness of anyone looking for such a thing could not be understood until a body needed to be scraped from the sidewalk. I was hooked into the book pretty quickly. And so in those early 3 chapters that I have read, you have the protagonist of the book. I'm using protagonist in sort of air quotes because this is definitely a book that is sort of about an unreliable narrator. She sort of wants to write the definitive biography of her dead wife because somebody else has written a biography and she thinks it's inaccurate. X really prided herself on being unknowable and hiding details of her past. And this woman, our fake narrator, feels like she is the one who can actually get to the bottom of things. And we're going to go on a wild ride as she makes discoveries. And I'm sure a lot of it is unreliable, but it seems like it's going to be absolutely fascinating. So I'm really glad that I'm reading this book, not just because I would say it is a contender for the Pulitzer Prize for fiction, but because it is, it's going to be a ride. I can already tell, and I think I'm going to love it just from those first 28 pages. I hope it does not lose steam because there's a long way to go. Let's see, how many pages is this? It is, oh, there are notes in the back of the book. I did not know that. And how many pages is it? It is 364 pages. I did have the option of reading this on audio or listening to this on audio, and I decided to wait for the print version because there are pages like, well, for one thing, there are footnotes, but there are pages like this where there are images and then text like a letter. And here you have a Montana driver's license for a character. So because there is so much visual detail in the book, I wanted to sort of wait until I had access to it. So I waited on the hold list at my library. It is here, and I'm really glad I decided to pick it up. I sort of spontaneously decided, you know what, I'm going to give that a try. And I'm glad that I did. This is the benefit and I guess the curse of being a mood reader. You don't always know what's going to happen next and if it's going to go well, but so far this is going well. So that is what I have been up to in my reading week. I'd love to hear what you've been up to, reading, watching, loving. I actually watched a bunch of early Oscar movies this week, and that has been interesting. So on the side, it's not an official project like my Pulitzer Prize project, but I have it in my mind that I would like to see all of the movies that have won Best Picture at the Academy Awards, and there's no timeline for this. I've been doing it for like 10, 15 years at this point, and I only had about 16 movies left. So I watched 3 of them this week. So now I'm down to, is that right? I think I'm down to 14 movies at the end of this week. I watched Cavalcade, which did not like. Grand Hotel, which I actually really liked. And I'm completely blanking on what the other one was, which might say a lot. I don't know. Oh, Wings, the very first, which actually is really thrillingly filmed. It's the very first Best Picture winner at the Oscars. And it kind of holds up. It's a silent movie. So the soundtrack replaying is like really bouncy and happy. So that doesn't really fit with dramatic moments in it. But it holds up surprisingly well. And the action sequences, because it's about World War I fighter pilots, are insane. Even by 2024 standards, they are insane. So that was the watching that I did this week. Let me know what you've been reading, watching, loving, hating, all that stuff in the comment section down below. Hopefully we'll get Teddy back next week. I can't make any promises because he was really not into it today. But anyway, as always, I really appreciate your time, and I will be back. Until next time, happy reading.